Hi, this is Sue Jackson of the Book by Book blog, here with another Friday Reads. So last week I had to put aside one book to read one for book group, and we just had book group last night, so I just finished this last night. We discussed Miss Benson's Beetle by Rachel Joyce, and as I mentioned last week, the same book group also read The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry and The Love Song of Queenie Hennessy. I think that's the full title, by the same author, Rachel Joyce. And we loved both of those books. So this one was a shoo-in when we voted for our next book. Almost everyone liked it. There was one person who was just kind of so-so, but most people gave it a 7 or 8 out of 10. We had a lively discussion. It's basically a female adventure story. It's about two women in 1950 who are kind of like the odd couple. They're total opposites, but somehow they end up together on an expedition to find a rare, perhaps even mythical, golden beetle on the Pacific island of New Caledonia. So the two of them set off on this expedition. They have no experience with this sort of thing. Like I said, they're complete opposites, but somehow they make it through. So it's a very fun and funny book. There are a lot of laugh out loud moments because of the sort of odd couple component of it, and the fact that they're so unprepared for this expedition. But as with all of Rachel Joyce's writing, I marked a lot of passages, the quotes that I just loved. She has a way of just kind of getting to the core of things. So Miss Benson's Beetle is all about female friendship and finding yourself, finding, your passion. I really loved it, and so did almost all of my book group. So that brought me back last night to the book I had started, All Clear by Connie Willis. So I haven't gotten very far yet. So as a reminder, that is book 2 of a 2-part series. The first book was Blackout by Connie Willis. And they are both part of her Oxford Time Travel series, which I love, and my husband's really enjoying too. So you can probably tell by the cover, this one takes place during World War II. In this first book, a whole bunch of historians, like around 2060, time travel technology is real, and a bunch of historians from Oxford are all sent back to different places and points in time during World War II in England. And their mission is simply to observe and study. This is the way it is in this future world, that historians study history by witnessing it firsthand. So there's one character that's gone back to rural England to help and observe the evacuation of children from London. There's another historian, and his thesis is all about regular people who become heroes, without any intention to. So in this first book, he was sent back to Dover to witness the evacuation of Dunkirk, which, as you may know from history, was done by just a bunch of private citizens with boats pitching in to save soldiers and bring them back across the English Channel. Another woman is sent back to London at the start of the Blitz. She gets a job as a shop girl. She's just kind of trying to fit in. And her assignment is simply to observe how ordinary people responded to this extraordinary circumstance of being bombed every night, night after night. So that was the first book. It ends on kind of a cliffhanger with the historians stuck in the past. For some reason, their technology's not working. So that's where All Clear picks up, with And those three that I mentioned are the main characters, but there are other historians from the future that are back in time, also observing in different points around England and at different times during the war. So the technology is glitching, and none of them can get back to their own time. Some of them don't realize that yet, but so that's where this book starts. And there's a tremendous amount of suspense through both books. Obviously, reading it as a contemporary, we know what happens with the war, but we don't know, what's going to happen to these individuals. They were sent back under certain safety conditions, and they are now well outside of their assignments. And so they do know when the bombings will occur and what places they'll hit, but they're not entirely sure now that their information is still correct. And the longer they stay in the past, the more they worry that they could somehow affect the future. So it's great time travel stuff, which I love. It's amazing historical fiction with lots of historical detail. Just fascinating to read about all these different pieces that were all a part of the war at that time in England. And there's the suspense of, will they be able to get back to their own time? So I am loving it. I'm happy to be back to it. As much as I enjoyed Miss Benson's Beetle, I'm glad to be finishing this story. It was my goal to read book 2 and finish the story by the end of the year. So I'm on track now. And finally, on audio, I've been listening to Under the Whispering Door by T.J. Klune. So a lot of people know about his first novel that was published last year. Oh God, I'm not going to be able to remember the exact name now. The Cerulean Sea. I know you know what I'm talking about. It's gotten a lot of buzz. A lot of people have talked about it. This is his latest novel, Under the Whispering Door. So this one deals with death and the afterlife. The main character is a man named Wallace who has lived his life very strictly. He doesn't have a lot of fun. He was married, but that didn't work out. He's a lawyer, and his whole life is his job. And he dies suddenly of a heart attack. And he finds himself in this odd, sort of limbo, this kind of place in between, this waiting place. And he has been assigned a reaper, a bubbly young girl, and she takes him to see the ferryman, who is named Hugo. So this is, as you can tell, it's fantasy, but based in the real world in terms of, Wallace has come from the real world. It's the afterworld part that's obviously made up since we don't really know. And there's a great sense of humor to this book. So far, I am really enjoying it. As you might expect, Wallace is having trouble adjusting. The job of the people he meets in this sort of middle place, their job is to help him adjust and get his questions answered and be ready to move on. But Wallace is nowhere near that point right now. So it's a fun book. It also deals with death, so it's dark in places, but I'm enjoying it so far. So that's Under the Whispering Door by T.J. Klune. And I would love to hear what you're reading this week. Let me know in the comments down below. I love to talk books, so tell me what you've got in store for reading this weekend.